So, Squeak, thank you so much for joining us here at the Fourth Word School Museum. You are a wonderful fixture here at some of our events as well as on C Street. But we'd love to take this chance to get to know you a little better. Could you tell us how you came by your nickname, Squeak Steele?
Well, Steele is my maiden name, and when I was about 6 years old, my mother had a baby, and it was my, brother, and he was 6 years younger than me, and so the relatives all came over one afternoon in August when he was about 3 or 4 months old, and oohed and awed over him, and I was out in the front yard doing my split, my headstand, my cartwheel, my back walkover, all of my acrobatic, and no one paid any attention to me. So I just began to make a high-pitched squeaking sound, and I didn't stop. I continued and continued and continued until I could see my mother kind of saying, And the next day, my best friend Cam, that I met in 1943 when we went to nursery school together, and we remained friends all of our life. Anyway, he helped me call myself Squeak at school, and from then it stuck. No teacher ever called me Squeak. But when I moved to Virginia City and began to teach music again in the schools, the kids were allowed to call me Squeak, and most of them called me Miss Squeak. So that's my story.
That's really cute, Miss Squeak. I like that. So it sounds like from your story that you've been performing almost your whole life, whether it was out in the grass,
right,
or at the Bucket of Blood Saloon tickling the ivories.
Right.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
When did you start with music?
My parents had a roll piano that my mother had grown up on, and my dad taught me how to thread the rolls when I was 3 years old, and I was, sitting on a little bench and holding onto a ledge, and the roll piano was playing as I pumped. And from that, I learned by ear a lot of old songs from the 20s and teens, and began to pick them out on piano. When I was born, when I was little, children were not allowed to take piano lessons until they were 8 years old, until they'd been in school a couple of years. It wasn't like it is now where, kids start when they're in the womb. Mm-hmm. When I started piano, I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know how to read music, and that was the next step. And then early on, I would play for church things because there was opportunities to do that, and anytime you can play and practice, it's good. So that's my sort of early story.
Very cool. And so one of the things that often follows your name anytime someone's sort of talking about you, discussing you, very shortly thereafter, after they say what a wonderful piano player you are, a musician, invariably they're going to talk about you being a Guinness Book of World Records holder, which is pretty cool, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But something that people may not know as much about is your climbing and your going to the base camp of Everest and Kilimanjaro and things like that. Could you enlighten us a little bit about that hobby of yours?
Well, the base camp of Everest was actually a part of a goal. I was interested in music of different cultures, and at that time in Nepal, if you said something to an educated person at a cocktail party about Nepal, they wouldn't know where you were talking about. And it's hard to believe now. This was in 1980. So I had a cheap little Panasonic recorder, and it was a 23-day trek, 18 days to the base camp, and then back 5 days to an airstrip that had been created for the American expedition of 1963 to be able to leave and not have to walk all the way back to Kathmandu. But along the way, I recorded children singing local songs. The Sherpas, at one point, the Sherpas that were helping us and the porters that were carrying some of the gear. By the way, I found a person there who also wanted to do this. So the two of us made a group, and we had 4 porters, a cook, and a guide. And they got to singing at one point, and they were banging on, keeping the rhythm with a pot at one of the locations where we stopped. So I got, a lot, not enough to make a long ethnic music tape, but a start. and from there I went to, I was in northern Thailand for a while. I was in Indonesia, lots of Indonesia. I've been to Indonesia 7 times and recorded a lot. The trouble is that now with technology, much of the culture of these people has been, has been washed out. People have forgotten these songs. They're not singing. They're listening to, things on the internet, right? But that was the, initial reason that I wanted to go. But I also had a fascination for Everest, and while that was at the time that the country of Nepal did not allow anybody to climb Everest unless they were with a country's expedition. In other words, you couldn't just, because you had $75,000, you couldn't just get pushed up Everest. You had to be from a country like France or Japan had a group. And the American ascent, the first American certain ascent was in 1963, and I had a very close friend in Jackson, Wyoming, whose husband was killed on that first ascent, and so it was kind of a pilgrimage. His name was carved up there, and it was a lot of things.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Wow. So it sounded like you had a personal connection to it.
A personal
too. What
connection.
did it feel? I mean, for anyone that has not been to base camp, what did it feel like when you finally arrived?
Well, to tell the truth, and this is the truth, you call it base camp, but you're not actually, if there's an expedition in there, you're not actually allowed to go in there. You actually climb a little mountain above it. But that counts as you're actually higher. But it was thrilling. It was like about 18,000 feet, between 17, and I wasn't sure how I'd do at altitude, but if you go slow and acclimatize as you go, you'll be fine. Most people are. And yeah, it was thrilling to be up there. A lot of these mountains that you climb, you're like, I'm here and I won't be here that long, and it's exciting. I've climbed the 11 highest points in the 11 western states of the lower 48 in my 60s. So that's, Utah, California, Mount Rainier, and Washington, all those, because I didn't think I'd be able to ever go to, Denali, what is that? Mount McKinley. Anyway, that was just the real focus of it. All these trips was to collect the music of people. So.
Oh, well, that's, a mission very near and dear to our heart here at the Fort Worth School.
Right.
Historic preservation,
when
you can, where you can.
Yeah.
So, we love that you did that. And like you said, very shortly thereafter, the internet's introduced in a widespread way, and cultures get sort of homogenized in that process.
Yeah.
So.
I brought the songs from Indonesia and Nepal back, and I was teaching school in suburban Philadelphia for about 25 years, and I transliterated all the language so it would be something we could read, and taught the children in that school the songs.
So not only were you preserving it, you were teaching it going forward.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's a great segue into talking about your teaching career, especially here with children at school in Virginia City.
Well, yeah, I taught back east, and I've taught on every level, including I taught as an adjunct professor at UNR, the university here in Reno. But I knew when I moved here, one of the things I wanted to do in this town was to create I don't want to call it a historic children's chorus. In other words, a children's chorus that sang what they sang here during the Bonanza era.
Oh, I love
I don't mean the TV program.
Sure, yes.
Okay.
You got to clarify that.
Yeah. And there were many children's choruses. If you read some of the reports, this was not, it will say, and at the 4th of July celebration, the children's choruses sang whatever and whatever. So I did some research. I got a grant to go to San Francisco and also to Berkeley, to a couple of libraries. In San Francisco, I went to a Pioneers of 49 place where, of course, we wore gloves to look at the music, and made some copies and taught the children some of those things, and also used American folk songs, from the South. And when you like a song, or when you love a song, and when it's something that's lasted this long, the kids love it too. They love to sing Battle Hymn of the Republic, anyway, I started in '94 with the first children's chorus, and had a parent help me take men's shirts for the boys and take the collar off. Okay, so we could make it just a single collar. Had them. We got pants, whatever pants, and made knickers out of them. And the girls, we just started collecting things. Not all of them were historic, but they looked historic, flowery things. And the boys wore, a lot of the boys wore the newsboy hats, the 5-paneled, and taught them the Virginia reel. All those things that, it's not, I did it for 23 years, and it was sad to let it go, but I just, was going to be taking an early retirement from the school district. So anyway.
Well, that's just a great way to bring history alive, because you're actually engaging with it. And like you said, the songs that have survived are obviously good because they're,
yeah, and
they were passed on because they were good, right? So I bet I would imagine some of the students that you taught years ago that are now adults probably still remember these songs, or we may forget things in school that we learned for a test, but when you're actually engaging with them.
This is true. This is true. I just had somebody on Facebook when I taught in suburban Philadelphia for 25 years in Lower Merion School District. I had to do big shows every year, and I'd have 100 kids in the 6th grade, So we had done a couple of Gilbert and Sullivan. We did the Mikado, and we did HMS Pinafore.
Right.
And this person wrote and said, using my name that I had to, my first husband's name and my real name, he said, "Are you the Barbara," in the title, "Are you the Barbara Moore that taught school in Marion School?" And I was like, yes. And then a whole bunch of kids came forth on Facebook and said, "Oh, yay, we remember this," and he put photographs on. That would be 1982, 40 years ago. Yikes. Those kids have grown up. Yeah. They're really grown up. They're probably grandparents.
How does that feel after all these years?
Yeah, it's happened a couple of times that kids have come forward. It's, I remember when we did this in music, or when we did that. That's really just the nicest thing that can happen, with something like that. Yeah.
I can only imagine. And when did you come to Virginia City for the first time?
I came in, my husband and I moved here my second husband, in 1990. So I've been here 32 years. And the story of how we came here is kind of strange. I had finished the Guinness book, and he lived in Jackson, Wyoming, where I had a cabin, and he said, "You have to come and see one of the 2 foreign countries in the United States. One of them is Manhattan, in New York, and the other one's Nevada. It's not like any place else." So we came here, and it was kind of snowing. We were going to go to Lake Tahoe. I'm making this too long. We were going to go to Lake Tahoe when we were in Reno, and he said, my grandfather, he had a kind of a famous grandfather. My grandfather met Mark Twain on a train in the early 1900s. And Mark Twain was in Virginia City at one point, and I didn't know that, and I had done some whatever. So we came up here, deciding the weather was not good enough to go to Lake Tahoe, and we went into a bar, and there was a piano, and I said, "May I play?" And so I played, and then they said, "Your drinks are free." So then we went to a second bar, and we're not big drinkers. We went to and the same thing happened. So after 4 bars, we said, "Where do we park the car?"
Right.
And we really loved it because there were more pianos per capita in this town. There was a piano there everywhere. So I was getting ready to not exactly retire, but leave the East, and we decided on a whim to come here. We went to all the saloons and made an initial tape, which we sold, called Keyboards on the Comstock. And I played, in each location, each piano. And that, from there, I went to the school district, and the rest is history.
Love it. And so Virginia City has a great musical history that runs parallel with it, as you know. Is there some things that you could share with us that you know, either songs about Virginia City or famous musicians that had come through here?
Well, of course, in the Opera House are 4 large poster boards of people who played here, and Recently, I came across a book and heard the author of the book talk right here at Virginia at the Fourth Ward about how important Virginia City, the Opera House, Pipers, and the other opera houses were in the musical scene of the, silver gold mining era. And you want to keep that going. So I've been part of many musical productions and in the Opera House. My students have played there. I wrote a soundtrack to a folk opera about one of the people here who was shot in cold blood on the streets of Virginia City in 2003. And so, I've been very involved with the Opera House along the way. There's some musicians that, that came out of here, I guess, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Merle Cook, Clyde Amsler, Dave Werbach, Red Watson, who lived to be 100, was a banjo player, taught me a bunch of things. Who else? Trying to think of. There are people before that I was ever here that people. Sometimes you'll get a customer at the Bucket of Blood who will say, "Do you know blankety blank? That was my uncle." I'd be like, I was back east then. I grew up in the South, and I didn't even know Virginia City existed, and it was the richest place in America at one point. Yeah, so. It's always a thrill to go in that opera house. I believe it's the largest remaining opera house in the American West that hasn't burned down and hasn't been made into something else. It's really, it's larger than the Aspen Opera House, the Wheeler. But many people that come through town don't know that they can actually go and see it. And all you have to do is, as you know, just go in and that's all, you don't even need to be there. It's just so overwhelming.
It almost speaks to you through the walls
Yeah.
and the history. You can
Yeah.
kind of start to feel or get the sense of, who performed here, or just what it would have been like.
And I was a close friend of Louise Driggs, who was the granddaughter of John Piper.
Oh, wow.
And she lived in the house next door. She's been dead probably 15 years. She was a fiddle player, a violinist. And she brought classical musicians for concerts here at one point. And somebody came and said, we want to put an ad in for the Opera House. She said, the Opera House needs no ad. It itself is the ad. It doesn't need to, Anyway,
Very
yeah.
cool. Tell us some of the productions that you've been in. I'd love to get on the record some of the names.
Oh man, now I'm having trouble. Remember, there's Bob McKinney. That's the shooting of Bob McKinney. We did, an Irving Berlin, Annie Get Your Gun, and Lacey J. Dalton, who's a very famous country western singer, lives here, and has worked for years to keep the wild horses wild. She was Annie. What else? I did some incidental music for the Nevada Shakespeare Festival. We met Hal Holbrook, who is Mark White. We met him because we had to pick him up at the airport and bring him up here when he did his show here in 99 or maybe 2000. I can't remember. So everything from Gilbert and Sullivan to Irving Berlin. And Irving Berlin has a connection here. Yeah, you probably know that too.
Please enlighten us, yes.
Irving Berlin, his wife, with whom he eloped, Ellen Mackey, her grandfather was John Mackey of the Mackey Mansion and the Mackey Fortune, one of the early, silver barons. And he and his wife had moved here, but she didn't, this would be Ellen's grandmother, did not like it here. She wanted to go back to New York and to Paris. So she ended up raising 3 kids, I believe, or maybe 2, in Long Island in New York. And one of them had a daughter named Ellen. And Ellen Berlin was a writer. She's one of the few women that were writers for the New Yorker back in the 20s. And she met Irving Berlin and So they eloped, and John, the Mackeys were furious because they said, here we have this fine Irish Catholic girl, and she has married a Russian Jew who plays by ear and will never amount to anything, you know?
Right.
And look what he did,
Yes,
you know?
yeah, the long view of history.
Right.
Puts some interesting perspectives on things, yeah.
True, yeah.
Yeah, very true, yeah. So, going forward here, let's see. Are there any songs that have been written about Virginia City that come to mind for you?
Well, when the two brothers, the Grosh brothers, they did not make it to Grass Valley, but somebody continued their quest because they knew the blue mud that was being found here was silver. And when that came out in the Sacramento Bee, there was a saying, the rush to Washoe was on, because Virginia City maybe hadn't been named yet. And so there's a great song called Glory, Glory, Washoe. Ooh. And yeah, and it's folk. I mean, we don't know who wrote it. It was mentioned in a doctoral paper by somebody whose last name is Hicks, I believe, a number of years ago. And then I went to the Nevada Historic Society, and they had a copy, or somebody had transliterated it, and I was able to, learn it, teach it to the kids. My kids learned it here, Glory, Glory, Washoe. There have been, other songs written about Virginia City and Nevada and Goldfield and, many places. The state song, Home Means Nevada, was written by a woman and made the state song about 1939. And my kids all learned that too. I'm a firm believer, and it doesn't matter your political beliefs, I'm teaching all of the songs that are relevant to our country and to patriotism.
It's all part of the history.
It is.
So I'd love to circle back to the Guinness Book of World Records. Could you tell us about how you became a Guinness Book of World Records holder?
I'd never do it again. As I said at one point, I don't know what I could be thinking. Well, I have a good memory. Mm-hmm. And when I was going to school, sometimes we didn't have textbooks, or we did, and we had to share them, and we had to memorize stuff. And then when I went to Sunday school, we had to memorize all the books of the Bible, So people don't memorize anymore. But in an earlier time in American history and schools, you memorized poems. You memorized To Be or Not to Be. Various important, the preamble to the Constitution, which I had my children memorize. So I was out one day with my agent. When I lived in Philadelphia, I played a lot of gigs of people, private homes, and then I had a couple of, I had one restaurant gig in Philadelphia, and that on top of teaching piano after school and teaching school.
Wow.
Okay, and raising two kids. So I said to him, I think I could get in the Guinness Book, blah, 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 because I know this and this and this and whatever. And he said, well, have you ever asked him? And I, if they had a record, and I said, no, and he said, let me do some research. So he, ultimately, they did not have a record, and he ended up being my producer. And now that I look at it all, if we had done it so that I could get the most amount of songs played for the record, we would have put all the simple songs, like Happy Birthday, it takes 5 seconds to play, right? But I have to memorize it, mm-hmm. right? But we didn't do it that way. We had various categories, and then we had judges that were selected after their background, whatever. It didn't have to be in music, like a minister who knew hymns, could say, no, she didn't play that correctly, okay? We had an attorney from City Hall in Philadelphia who knew jazz. And we're not talking about the things that people know, that are everybody knows. We're talking about things that are a little more obscure. Mm-hmm. So he wrote to get us, and they said, yes, you have to do this in the public, in the public eye. He found a piano. He found an incredible venue for me. It's near Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It's called the Bourse Building, and that's the old financial exchange, okay, the old stock market. It has many balconies going around the top of it, and then there's a center space where the piano was. So he orchestrated all of that, and then at the conclusion, he had to provide a really in-depth report of everybody's bio, who was a judge, of how long I played each day. Not so much the songs, you didn't have to write that down, but what happened is if you were a judge and you said, okay, I'm calling, Night and Day by Cole Porter. And then I played it. There were two other judges, and each of them would, you would check off, she played this and put your initials, then pass the notebook so that we knew who had witnessed my playing and confirmed it, that it was correct, okay?
Yeah, got it.
I only played about 3 hours a day most days, and then some days 5 hours a day. But I had taken a sabbatical from my school job, and I was going to school one day a week because I wrote soundtracks for the Grand Canyon, and that was a whole other era in here. And so I was learning computer, recording on the computer for multi-track soundtracks for industrials and documentaries.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Wow. You've done so much in your career that it's fascinating. We could be here for days, I think.
Yeah.
How many days did you record for the world record?
We planned it as a 3-week event.
Wow.
And what happened was we got, we were getting near the end, and I had 2,300 songs I was ready to play. But we only got 1,852 of them done. And my friend had made a big board that had wheels. So every time I'd play one, they would, do the wheel, right? It was pre-computer. I mean, we couldn't do that. So it was every day except Monday when I was in school to work on Wednesday. I did it twice in the day, 3 hours the midday and then 3 hours at night, and I didn't want any money from it, but I didn't want to pay for parking. So my friend, who was a Quaker, said, you can park at the Quaker meeting, I'll make sure. So I had a place to park. Okay. And I would take a 5-minute break every hour, just 5 minutes, and I managed to get from the movie Big one of the smaller walking pianos, so I could play anything that was like a folk song or whatever, or chopsticks on the walking piano. Mm-hmm. And from that, I got gigs, and I got a gig in Anaheim where I had to be Ginger Rogers, and I had to pick up Fred Astaire to dance with me on that keyboard. And I got to wear one of Ginger Rogers' dresses. Yeah, this is really great. Yeah. And the guy that I chose was a piano player I knew who was my daughter's age, and he would roll with anything, go, whatever. And so we did it at Jacob Javits Center in New York. We did San Diego, Washington, D.C. As long as that kind of interest in the walking piano, which is from the movie Big, Tom Hanks dances on it with Robert Loggia in that movie, and it had kind of a shelf life of about 2 years. So that's what came out of the Guinness record thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question. How does life change after you become a record holder?
Well, people think when you have something like that, they think you can play anything, but you have to have it memorized. I mean, but sometimes somebody will ask for something in the Bucket, or I played at the Gold Hill Hotel for 25 years too, and I will say, if you can sing it, I can probably play it, because sometimes you forget the title of stuff, and I don't know that, I guess it gives me some credibility, but it's not been that great.
You said you'd never do it again. Why would you never do it again?
Well, it was just too much. The one feeling, that I wish somebody had asked me about my brain. When I was preparing for it, I would just spend hours every day going through stuff. Not so much like, I got to memorize. No, I already had it memorized. I was redoing it, right? And at the end, when I was starting to actually play, I just felt like my head was swollen with all of the stuff, Now, one thing I could do is you could call something, and I would think, I can't remember what, well, this is couple of ways, but I would defer and say, you know, I want to put that one off. And they allowed me to do, well, we made up the rules, but you have to make all of this. You have to send video footage, and you have to send all the press stuff to Guinness. And even if they say, okay, we're going to give you a record, they don't guarantee a place in the book, and they don't say they'll even send you a certificate, but they did. But they didn't even send me a case of Guinness. I mean,
that's
I think after all that.
What do we want to be record holders for if not for the,
Right.
the Guinness? I know, huh? Do you get any perks? Is there anything that the rest of us don't get? Good parking spots, anything like that?
No. Yeah, because being in an advanced age, I get some perks, but
Okay.
no.
Just-
And it's just something that, you know, it was thrilling and in another sense, but it was just great to have it over with, you know. But I do rely on my memory. I mean, I'm from an era when I memorized all the phone numbers of people, or if I got to Munich, I would know, you know, how to get to the person's house, or I could remember that number. I mean, it was so handy.
Yeah.
You don't have to look up on your phone.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, heaven forbid you drop your phone and it breaks, and you're like,
Yeah, right.
I don't know what's going
What
on.
was, yeah, it's. I mean, people still call and say, what was that? The wallpaper that we had in the Cape May house back in '78. You know, what was that? You know, but I'm very bad on left and right. I'm good on north and south. I'm left-handed, and if you tell me to go get something in the left cabinet on the second shelf on the right, then I have to think about it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I
actually,
know
how much you have to-
the
how
L.
much
The
you have
kids
to kinda
show me.
think about
Squeak,
it, right?
you have to do L.
I do square dancing, and so there's things that have left
yes,
and right, and you
yes,
can't give
yes.
out a right hand when you need to put out a left. So I put a bracelet on the left. That helps
Are
me
you
remember.
left-handed too?
No, just because I'm right-handed, so I'll remember the right hand calls, and I go to put out my hand, and I go, no, left. So the bracelet helps. I don't know if that could help you, maybe.
There was one thing about the brain that I wanted to say. I'm sure everybody's had this experience at some point. A song would be called, and I thought, I can remember the beginning, but what is the bridge? I'm not sure. The bridge is that middle part, right? And then I think, well, I'm going to give it a shot. And you're like going down, you know, you're skiing down the mountain, and you're like, am I going to remember what? And just as you get to the last moment when you're going to wipe out, it comes to you because it's linear and it's all in there. That was such a great. Because I'd never been in a situation where, well, no, I had been. When I did concerts, when I went to Oberlin, I went to college at Oberlin, and then music school after that for composition. But, you know, you would be on stage and you'd have to play the next thing. But I'm also good enough, and I mean good enough, but I'm also, my ear will help me make up something if I can't. But I didn't want to do that for them because they might say, I never heard that in the middle of, you know,
you want to do it
T for
legitimately.
two,
Yes,
or don't stop believing.
Right.
So actually, I don't think I knew any Journey at the time, but I played 100 Beatles songs
Wow.
and over 500 hymns, and I could tell the person what page the hymn was on.
Wow. I wish I had your memory. That's incredible.
Sometimes I need to go to a bulk dump, you know. But back to Virginia City. It's been wonderful to live here.
Yeah.
Small town, but we get these tourists and then they leave. We get the town back. And the history that's associated with it, although, you know, a lot of people don't realize how amazing that is, that once we were the richest place in the world.
Right. People
Yikes.
followed C Street like they follow Wall Street. It was the financial center of where it was at the time. I mean, you know, and we don't think about that.
First place to have gas lights between Denver and San Francisco.
Just,
you know?
yeah,
Just,
we can go on.
We can't imagine the wealth of people who, in one day, you know, that the little, you know, mining plot they had, all of a sudden,
Lives can change on a dime here, especially in those days. It was, you could wake up with a hole in your pocket, and then you could go to bed a millionaire.
Yeah, and the, you know, the source of the Hearst fortune and the Stanford fortune, all these things comes from here. Yeah. I mean, I'm in a dilemma because my kids live in Minneapolis and New York, and I don't want to leave here, but you know, I don't get to see them very much if I don't. And so they're like, Mom, it's either the mountains or us.
That's a tough choice.
Anyway.
So, where are some places you've mentioned? We've mentioned the Bucket of Blood. We mentioned the Gold Hill Hotel for 25 years. Where are some other places, Pipers? Are there any other places in town that you've played or played on a regular basis?
I've played. Fortunately, they have a really nice old upright at St. Mary's Art Center. Have you been down there?
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And I actually did it before Erica came, but Erica's really done. She has done wonderful things for that space. Not only have I volunteer for her if she's having an event, I play for her, but also I've taken my students and we do a Christmas thing there, or whatever. We have a recital there using that piano. Where else? There are several grand pianos in town in people's homes, and I've done chamber music at John Schaefer's house with my sister-in-law, who's a viola player from New Jersey, a friend who's a cellist from Jackson Hole, and then a really great violinist from Portland. So we've done, as a matter of fact, it was for the Fourth Ward School benefit.
Oh, great.
We did it was one of the Fourth Ward School's parties of the year. There were many different people who volunteered, and so we put together a chamber music, and John has a nice grand piano. Other than that,
How about
a
any
lot
of the
of
churches
pianos
in
are
town?
gone. Well, yeah, I play the organ at the Presbyterian Church, and I've played many times at the Catholic Church. I'm not the only. I'm sort of the sub organ, but it's amazing how many gigs, how many times they need an organist. For somebody's wedding,
Yeah.
a funeral, So yeah, anything that's got keys on it. I'm gonna play.
Yeah, you got it. Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's a great question. Do you play anything else beyond besides piano?
Not, when I was in school to become a music teacher, you had to take all the instruments of the orchestra. So, in other words, you might not take cello, but you could take bass. You had to take one of the larger, and then for violin or viola. So I took violin, and then I took bass, and I learned trumpet, but nothing proficient enough to, play in concert.
But you play so well the piano that I think it makes up for not knowing anything else.
And the
'cause it's
piano's so
close.
complete.
Yeah.
The only thing is you aren't playing with anyone, and you can play with people, but an instrument like clarinet or trumpet, you can only play one note at a time. And piano, you can do everything. It's very, very complete.
So for many people, their only interaction with you, today, for example, is as a tourist, perhaps just walking into the Bucket of Blood and seeing you play in this wonderful, environment that it almost takes you back in time almost because of the wonderful fashions that you wear and then the style and the environment. For someone who's not yet had the pleasure of experiencing that, could you explain to us what it's like playing at the Bucket of Blood regularly and
Well, in
that
any situation like that, you don't want to interfere, but you want to be, not below the level of perception. But I think, audiences keep getting younger. When I first moved here, mostly what was played in these places was Dixieland jazz. That's a type of jazz, okay? Jazz is a big word, and that's what most of my recordings are, but I play a lot of popular music, and I try to size up the crowd and see, am I going to play, I don't know a lot of contemporary country western, but I play a lot of old western stuff, and people do love hearing that, occasionally you'll play something like Sweet Caroline, the bar starts singing. Or if you play Hallelujah, yeah, I know. That always gets people.
I've been walking down the boardwalk past the Bucket of Blood, wasn't planning on going in, and I heard you playing Hallelujah, and it made me turn right in. Yeah, it's like a siren.
Yeah, and
it's a beautiful
I mean,
song.
some of those things, I'm not really a singer, but I had to sing for years to teach school. So I think, and we have different kinds of music there. We have David John and the Comstock Cowboys. They do a lot of his music, which is really, cowboy western oriented. But he's a great composer. He knows how to put stuff together. I've played a lot of piano extras on his albums, you know, the little riffs at the end of a phrase. And then Glenn and Molly from Lady and the Tramps are more rock and roll. And then I play everything from ragtime to the Pachelbel canon to, I mean, somebody asks for Claire de Lune, I'll play it. It may not sound great in a bar atmosphere, to, you know, popular music from every era. I mean, it's one of the great things about being old is that you don't have to learn all this stuff. You've learned it going up, and you've got all this, you know, 50, 60 years of.
Yeah, you don't have to be like me where I'm sitting here, you know, researching for hours. You just know it, you lived it, which is so cool.
You know, I don't know. Occasionally I'll get a person who will request. I always ask when people, would you know this? And I'm like, yeah, I think I can do that. Do you sing? And you will get a singer now and then.
Oh, yeah.
And then I can be the doo-wops in the back. Yeah. I love that. And I love to accompany, you know. And then the singer will be like, yeah, I can't remember. Like the words are on your phone. You can always find the words.
That's very true. You
got to let me know what key you want it in. Or somebody will say, you know, I play trumpet. I'm like, well, is it in the car? You've got to carry your axe with you.
Yeah.
You know, we could do some jazz. We could do whatever. So occasionally you have, you know, a surprise from somebody who sings well, and that's what makes it fun. You don't know what's coming next.
Oh, that's wonderful. I bet that's like a memory that they'll remember for forever, right? Yeah. You know, I went to Virginia City and a concert broke out. So we've covered a lot here. Is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you'd like to include or you think is relevant?
Wow. What's going to be the next step?
What's next for you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter-in-law was saying you need to do more with like education of ragtime, or you need to be whatever. But I'm not sure what that holds. I miss working with the children. I wish that was more, but it's that means you have to do the whole school. You know, I don't know. I can't wait to see what the future will bring. You know, and during lockdown, my kids took lessons on the, you know, with Zoom, and then I created a studio at my home so that one piano was there and one piano was here. We both wore a mask, and so we could, you know. So, you know, the pandemic slowed me down, but I have to say that once the gigs started coming in, they just, you know, it's really been great. California didn't open up like we did, so people would come from California on the weekends to, you know, to our bar and to hear music, and they would tip. The tips that I've gotten in the last 2 years have been the best I've ever gotten. And so we like to close out. I don't know. It's been delightful to talk to you. You really know a lot about our town, and you've done your homework. And
not bad for a Californian, huh?
I say to California, you know, last thing in the bucket, sometimes I'll get talking to people and I'll say, where do you live? And they'll say, oh, I live in Dayton. And I'm like, well, if you live in Dayton, you moved from Southern California in the last 3 years. And they're like, how'd you know? I'm like, I keep track of all this, you know? Mm-hmm. So we have a rule. Don't bring your code from California, and don't bring an attitude, and you'll be fine.
Love that. I think that's a good place to wrap this up. This was beautiful. Thank you so much, Squeak. We really appreciate you being here with us.
This was fun.
Yeah, great. Yay. And stay tuned. From here, we're actually going to take this show on the road, and we're going to go follow Squeak to the Bucket of Blood Saloon and watch her play. Thank you so much.
I need a saxophone player. Can you do this? Just do
And lots of land on the starry skies above. Don't fence me in.